what do all sellers want to know the first time that you meet them? What are the first two questions that a seller typically wants to know? And John, what did you say? Commission and price, right? So how do we handle that when they come out the gate and say, okay, what do you charge commission? Do we answer that?
No.
We do? We don't?
Not yet.
Not yet.
How do we handle it? When do we do it?
Towards the end.
Towards the end, that's good. So have you guys heard the listing presentation? Has John done that for you, or George done the listing presentation for you? I know Rosie's heard it. Has anybody else heard it? Okay, so there's some key things that have to happen in the presentation. But we're going to talk about them, and we're going to get into it. The biggest thing is you got two phases, okay? You have phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2, I heard some of you say that we don't talk about commission to the end, which is the correct answer. And why is that? Why do we want to wait towards the end before we start talking commission? And how do we handle that question as it comes up? Does anybody know why we want to talk to you? I'm sorry?
You want them to know you're worth it?
Absolutely. Right. So you want to know that you're worth it, right? That there's a difference. What do most sellers think that agents, what differentiates an agent?
We're all alike.
They think we're all the same, right? The commission's the difference in the agent. So basically it's the 3 Ps, right? They think that when you take a listing, all the listing agent does is they pray that it sells. They put a sign out front, and then that they also put it on the internet. That's all we do as agents. So we have to create the value. So the very first phase, phase 1, is choose me. Until we've created enough value, what most of us, or what many agents do too early, is they're trying to close for the sale too early. You have to have enough equity in the bank. You got to ask enough questions. We got to go through a certain particular process. And I guess the biggest thing that was the huge aha is when I understood that this listing presentation was different than just having a beautiful book that you went through page 1 to page 100, which how many, I know you've been in the business for some time. Do you remember the old school way of doing the listing presentation? With flipping through with the tabs from the beginning to end and talking about how great we are individually? Can anybody relate to that?
Me.
Absolutely, right? So it's all about me. But when I put choose me, don't confuse that with that. Because what we're going to start with is we're starting with the tap. Is your intro, and we're going to focus on the tap. And I'll talk about that. Then we're going to get into discovery. The discovery is the most important part of the presentation. Again, we got to get the answers to the test. It's not about just doing one generic presentation. We have to know the personality style of who we're speaking to. We need to know exactly, what's important to that particular seller. It's all about the seller. Everything's about the seller, asking the questions. It's also about understanding who they are and what it is that they want. And our job is to identify that and then become who they need us to be to help guide them through that process. Because as John just talked about on Wednesday, this is all about leadership and our ability to communicate. So we need to perfect our ability to communicate through the presentation by, one, having just a good idea in terms of how that presentation is going to start and end and what are we trying to accomplish through that. So who has experience with listing presentations? Okay. What would you say is the most important thing that needs to happen in that presentation for them to hire you to decide that you're the right one for the job?
The value that you bring.
The value you bring, and how do you create that value?
Well, showing them what you've done for other clients.
Right.
Some storytelling.
Stories, right? So you'll have some testimonials.
Mm-hmm.
We also call them sound bites. Have you guys heard of the terminology sound bites?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So sound bites are the benefits, the value of what you bring, but it's also what Century 21 brings. So there's certain things that you're going to work on. And so one of them, when I asked, okay, what differentiates us between any other agent, it's important to understand that because the sellers, they don't understand what it is that we do every day. So we have to very quickly be able to articulate that we have the experience, that we have the success stories, and that we're going to lead them through the scary process that they really don't know. And so we have to help them understand by asking them questions, to getting them to self-discover. Because if we don't do that, if we just tell them, oh, this is the way that you're supposed to do everything, what is telling? Telling's repelling. Okay, just remember that. That's a big thing that we've heard from mentors in the past. Telling is repelling. You tell somebody this is what you have to do, it pushes them away. But if you ask them, you can say the exact same statement with a different tone, and you ask them, now when they answer it, it's their idea, and they're owning it. So those are the things that we're going to go through as we go through this process. Okay, so I'm going to jump into it. So the tap. What is the tap? Has anybody heard of the tap for the introduction? Okay, anytime you're doing any presentation, whether it's one-on-one or in a group presentation like this, there's three things you want to do. You want to thank who's there, so your audience. Whoever comes, you want to come from a place of gratitude. Again, this is about serving other people. You want to acknowledge, the A is for acknowledgement. Acknowledgement can be a few different things. Rosie, I know you've done this before. What's one way of doing a tap for acknowledgement?
Brandon, thank you for letting me come out today. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Wonderful, that was perfect. So she acknowledged the person's time, right? And the opportunity to speak to them. That's very important. So we want to acknowledge, it could be about the home, how beautiful it is. It could be about them and their time if the house isn't the most beautiful house, when you show up, and we have that happen at times as well. And we don't, we want to still be excited about it, but we also, you have to be real and you got to connect with them. And then the promise. What's important about the promise? This sounds so simple and so basic, but literally we can literally spend a Friday and just practice this. The reason why this gets to be so important is because what people are looking for, it's not always the words that you're saying. It's your confidence. It's how certain you are in the process. They're looking for a leader, right? So that promise becomes very critical just in your introduction. So one way it can sound is something like this. Okay, so BJ, you're going to be my seller here, okay? So BJ, thank you for your time today. You have a beautiful home, and you were mentioning on the phone that you need to be in San Diego by July. My promise to you is I'm going to show you, and by the end of today, you're going to know how you're going to be in your home in July. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so I pulled something from what we spoke about on the prequel that he told me he needs to be at his home in July. So my promise and commitment, one, I heard him, right? I listened to him. I heard exactly what it is that he's trying to do. So I acknowledged that. And then I made a promise and a commitment. And you could get even stronger. I guarantee that you will be in San Diego by July 1st. I promise you that if you follow my lead, I will show you how you will be in your home by July 1st, right? It can get that strong. And some people have responded to me, well, how can you promise? How can you promise? How do you know what price it's going to be? How do you know what it's going to sell at? The way that you can promise with that, if you follow my lead, I promise you that you will get the results that you're looking for. Now, if you don't follow my lead, right? If we don't get it to the right price, if we don't adjust the price when it's necessary to adjust the price, I can't promise you anything. Do you see where where you can speak of that conviction and then make that, the condition that they understand? If you follow my lead, I promise you, you'll get the results that you want to get. How can we promise with that type of conviction? How can we know, how can you know that you're going to sell the house?
Make the 50% of the market value.
That's one way to do it. You can promise that the home will get sold, right? Price will sell any home, any property, period. Okay, just know that. The right price will create the value, and that's what we're going to do through this presentation, is we will get to the pricing strategy. We will explain how pricing works, and how if you follow the proper pricing strategy and the right guidance and advice, you can guarantee that they will sell their home and get the results that they're looking for. Okay? So that's just our tap. That's just our introduction, just to start with. Can anybody guess what happens after the introduction? What's the next step?
Walk around the home.
Walk around the home. That's typically what I'll start with, to be honest with you. I go straight to, do you mind if you can give us a tour of the property so I can see what you've done to the home? And then we go through, and I'm still doing discovery. Oh, do you have AC, right? When was the last time you replaced your roof? A lot of rain over the last couple years. Roof is a big thing, right? So we want to start talking about challenges. We want to start talking about issues. We want to start identifying what is going on with the property so that they realize, I've heard many people say, oh, it's going to be the smoothest process you've ever gone through. Personally, I don't promise that. My promise is that I'm going to help lead you through the way, right? We have these challenges. We're in a very dynamic real estate market right now. Very dynamic. It's changing. You need to know week by week what's happening in the real estate market. Month by month, if you watch the inventory, it's changing dramatically month by month in terms of how much it'll fill up and then how many sales are dropping it. In 93035, just to put in perspective, did a presentation a few months ago, 7 months inventory, I think that was in November. It's already now down to 4 months, but it's already starting to increase again to almost 4 to 5 months in 93035 in that zip code. Average days on market, guess what the average days on market showed for December for 93035?
93.
It was almost 160 days.
Whoa.
It was like 150, 160 for the full month of December. It was as of December going into January. But 90 is very common, and that's what you're seeing a lot of. And I saw the same thing happen in Newberry Park. So we need to become market experts. And what I'm doing this afternoon is going to be the Flex Market Summary Report. We're going to record that. But that's one report that I'll use every time I show up to a presentation. So the reason why I asked about, the old, I don't even want to say the old school binder or the presentation that we all relied, or many agents relied very heavily on those presentations, and how strong that presentation was how strong they felt as agents. I can tell you right now that you can literally show up without that, with a Flex Market Summary Report, with a one-line report, the CMA, just black and white, no pictures, with your listing agreement, right? I'm gonna have what I call my report card, and a report card is gonna be all my past sales. Usually I'll go back to 2018, because what I wanna show is my average days on market versus what's the average for the zip code, right? 93035, show 120 days versus your 16 days average days on market. Does that show any value? Absolutely, right? You're showing that you get results. Then the other thing is the list price versus sales price. That's how high you sold the property at versus what you listed at. That's another percentage on there. On there, ideally, if you can, you have it around 100%. It's like 96 to 100%. Well, there's another chart that shows, based on the month that it sells, what's the list price versus the sales price. These are all reasons for sellers to want to try to hurry up and sell now as opposed to waiting. Well, there's too much competition right now. Let's just wait till later on part of the year. Maybe it'll be a better time to sell, right? And then we need to get into the market. So I jumped ahead just a little bit, but that's your tap. Walk through the home, right, for the tour. We're still doing discovery, and you led into the next section, which is discovery. But before that, I'm going to do an overview of blueprint. Okay, so some people say tap map. It's just easy to remember. A map gives you a blueprint, gives you some direction. The blueprint is going to go over, it's going to sound something like this. So after we do tap, then we get into, okay, so first we're going to start off by discussing what your needs, what your wants are, and what your expectations are in the agent that you look to hire. Then we're also going to talk about what my expectations are of the sellers and what we have to do together to work together to successfully sell your home, right? Number two, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about my plan of action. So the plan of action is really important, and it's something we need to work on. And the good news is, for everything that I'm discussing right now, it's all in your Century 21 Everest script book. There's the presentation outline, so you're going to have that there. Watch this video, it's being recorded right now. You can outline it the way that makes sense for you so that you feel comfortable and confident that you know, okay, this is how the presentation is supposed to go through. Okay? So, after second, so number one was going to discovery, needs, wants, expectations, right? Number two is going to be plan of action, what I do as an agent to get homes sold. Okay, so we're going to discuss those points. Number three, we're going to talk about the market, where the market's been, where it's at, and where it's heading. The market impacts the price in terms of how we're going to come up with the price together, right? Finally, if you feel confident and comfortable, but that I'm the person to list your home and to sell your home, we're going to take care of some paperwork. Does that sound good? So we do our tap, we do our overview, and then we start into our presentation. Does that having some type of clarity like that, could you see the advantage to that in your presentation? Okay, we got to give them some direction so they know what to expect. So after that, now the most important part is your questions that you're asking these clients. You really want to know your top 3 off the top of your head. There's 22 that are listed, 22 questions for the listing presentation that's in your script book, right after the Everest listing presentation. So study that, see which ones that you like. But let's just say, are there any questions that you start with, anybody in this room, that you start with on a listing presentation that's an important question to ask?
Do you absolutely have to sell?
I'm sorry?
Do you absolutely have to sell your home?
Do you absolutely have to sell your home? That's a great question, okay? And why would you ask that question?
Show that they're motivated.
Motivation, right? So good motivation question. So we're trying to identify certain things through these questions to know, number one, how motivated they are. Also, any objections that we're going to have to overcome. And many of us are afraid, or when I say many of us, I'm just talking through experience for the agents that I've coached and I've worked with. It's sometimes we don't want to ask a question that we don't want to hear what that potential answer could be, right? Like a question like, do you feel that I'm the one to sell your home? Right? It's a pretty strong question. And they could say no. Right? They could say, no, you know, we kind of like you, but you're all right. We want to get to that point, because when we do, we're going to find out what their hesitation is. And then we can isolate the objection. And this is what happens when you follow this system, this recipe. You will get to where you can isolate the objection, identify what their hesitation is with working with you. And it also tells you, when people come up with the objection question, the reason why I get excited about the objection is I know that once I overcome that objection, what comes next? The close, right? Success. So I get excited about the objections because before we make any important decision, listing a home, right? Getting married, you know, any major life decision, you're gonna have second thoughts. You know, my wife, please don't. There's certain things you start questioning. It's like, am I making the right decision? You know, this is a very important decision. When you go through that process, they're close to committing. So if you can overcome that objection, the next natural thing is a close. Okay? So just it's all about how do I look at the objections, and we'll feel more comfortable the more we practice it. And again, 7% of it is actually the words. It's your body language. It's your ability to communicate. It's the eye contact, tonality. Do we come off as an interrogator when we ask questions? Or do we come off as somebody who's sincerely interested, right? And these are the things, as we talk about Napoleon Hill, he talks about the sincerity of purpose. Sincerity of purpose is huge in what it is that we do. In becoming the strongest leader, they have to know that you're sincere in your intentions of helping them. And if they sense that and they feel that you're coming, now you can confront them from a place of love and say, we're priced too high, okay? This is, I know you want to be in San Diego by July 1st. It's not going to happen if we stay at this price. And when they know that and they feel that, they're going to follow your lead. You're going to get completely different results and responses to what you're doing, okay? All right, so we went over the overview, talked about the plan of action. We're going to get into more details on future ones of what we do to sell a home. And some of it we've already talked about, communication being very important. So we want to have a conversation about communication with our clients. We want them to understand that that is one of the most important abilities that a real estate agent has, is their ability to communicate. So we want to talk about that. We also want to ask them, what are your expectations with communication? Because typically, I don't know about you, but you know, how do you like it after every show? Oh, how'd that go? You know, what happened? Did they like it? Did they write? Did they do, you know, every single day? What's going on? Is anything happening? So we have to future pace, set proper expectations about communication that, hey, every Monday between 2 and 3 o'clock, I'm going to call you up and we'll speak about what's happening with your property. The amount of showings that you've had, the activity that you've had, what other homes have gone into escrow, and why they went into escrow and we didn't. And it all comes back, again, to condition, availability, and price. Okay? Yes, sir.
Nothing causes more frustration on a seller that is not getting any showings and offers than not getting a call from you.
Absolutely. Great point. Did you guys hear that?
Make it in your schedule, and if you have buyers or sellers, to follow up with them even if nothing has happened.
Even more importantly, if
Yes.
nothing's happening. Why is it more important if nothing's happening?
Because you want to show that you're consistent communication with them.
Absolutely. Show the consistent communication. You know, one of the things that my dad taught me very early on, and some of you know my parents are in the business as well, so I was brought into the business second generation. One of the very first things my dad shared with me was, look, everybody can deliver good news. Everybody has no problem. Hey, you got your offer accepted. We got this happening, right? Everybody can be the hero and deliver that good news. But the difference in an agent is the one who can deliver the bad news. And you deliver the bad news sooner than you deliver the good news. Because the bad news only continues to get worse, right? So it's our ability to communicate. It's our ability to confront. Coming from a place of love and service, right? We're not doing it because we want a paycheck. We're doing it because we know this is the only way that they're going to get the results that they look for. So we have to have that honest conversation. So the better our questions get, the better our ability to confront a tough situation is going to increase not only your ability to take listings, but to lead them to successful results. It's one thing to take a listing, it's another to sell it, right? And we have to set those proper expectations in the listing presentation so that when we set it, now they know when we're having that discussion, okay, now's that time that he's telling us we've had no showings. 0 showings, and it's the first week it hit the market. Yes, sir.
One thing that you guys can do is you can go to Zillow and look at how many eyeballs that your property had.
Right.
Even if you had no showings, you gotta call the seller with something.
Yep.
It says, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we have this many views online.
Mhm.
You know, the Century 21 gives you a market report.
Right.
And I think the other thing that we had, give a market report. Figure a market report for yourself. And then tell them we had this many eyeballs on the property,
Right.
but no showings. Looks like the market is not seeing the value.
So that conversation that Vicente is referring to right now is one of the most critical parts to having success in your business with your listings. It's continually having your stats, your numbers. You don't just call up and say, hey, we've had no showings, right? You want to show them, hey, remember, you're with Century 21. You get more exposure with our company than with any of the other brands out there. When your property is listed with us, and I'm getting ahead to the sound bites, right? And you list with Century 21, your property goes onto century21global.com. We're in over 80 countries. This is in your Toolkit CMA listing presentation. If you guys haven't used it, it's called the Toolkit CMA presentation, which is on 21 Online, and we'll do that in the future as well, and we're going to work on that. Yes,
I
ma'am.
want to add one thing.
Yes.
When you are dealing with a negative situation with your seller,
Mhm.
and you call them, you don't want to say, hey, Jack, how are you? Well, and then go into the bad. You
Right.
go,
Straight to it.
don't start, putting any fluff in there.
Right.
Go straight to it.
Great point. Good job. Yeah, no, it's people just want to know, especially if it's bad news. And try not to, if you can, if there's 2 bad news in the same conversation, try not to have it where you're hitting them with the double whammy, but you got to be real. But always call with the solution as well. So this is the problem, this is what I'm going to do, right? This is the problem with the price, this is what I'm going to do. We've had no showings, but this is what I'm going to do. But we're having this talk because you're in one of the most critical times in terms of your listing period, this first week with not a single showing that has taken place, right? And then you can tell them the one next door has already had 3 offers on it, 1 at full price, 1 over. I've spoken to the agent because they're priced where they need to be. So one thing I'll refer to is a sweet spot. I'll always say we got to get to the sweet spot. Nobody knows exactly what a home's going to sell for unless they have a cash buyer who's ready to go and pay that purchase price. It's the only way that you could promise and guarantee that they're going to get a particular price. Don't fall for that. Don't fall for just saying, no, I promise you you're going to get this price. We don't know. There's a pricing strategy that takes all the pressure off of you, that you can promise them you're going to guide them through what we're going to find what the market's willing to bear, right? What is a buyer willing to pay? And these are all the different points of what you want to share with them from your experience of why they want to choose you to lead them through the process. But great point, Betty. Okay, so now we're getting into, I want to talk about the market some, okay? So the market, and as we mentioned early on, I said price and commission, right? We don't want to talk to until the end. Now we're gonna practice in the future commission objection handlers, as well as price objection handlers and relative objection handlers and every other objection that we hear that comes up. We need to think about it, right? We need the night to think about it. We're gonna practice that in the future. But getting back to price and commission in the market, And then the last thing that I wanna make sure that we definitely hit on is called temperature gauge question.
Brandon, are we gonna have access to your recording?
Yes.
Oh, great,
Yeah,
awesome.
thanks to Cindy here, she's recording, it's on YouTube, and she's like, great, well, I hope it works now, right?
Yeah.
So, hopefully she's streaming it on YouTube right now. So, okay, so as we talk about the market, what is it that we're gonna discuss in the market? What would you imagine we talk about in the market?
What's the current condition of the market?
Current condition of the market, okay? So how could that sound? Does anybody have any ideas of what's happening in the market today? Points that you would bring up with today's market?
Days on market.
Average days on market, okay? Anything else?
Prices that are getting lowered, expired listings, cancellation.
Beautiful. Okay, so I'll bring up the Newberry Park situation. Well, actually, this one's, yeah, Newberry Park. We'll start with that one. So the Newberry Park property, for this property was between 700 and $1 million, right, is the price point that we were looking at. The one thing, the one thing I found out is with, roughly 32 listings that went up for sale, 17 of them canceled or expired. The average days on market was 109 days on market there. There was a high sale that everybody was pricing their property off of, bless you, and it wasn't a fair, even though it was a model match, it had a 24,000 square foot lot as opposed to everybody else was at about a 6,000 square foot lot. While the 6,000 square foot lot homes were pricing off this 980 sale. So I knew that the other people I was competing against for that listing, that they were gonna quote a price over 900,000 at 900 or higher. My quote, I gave them a sweet spot, a range between 865 and 885. We listed at 885, eventually dropped it to 865, and as you can hear, got the listing, right? But it took 40 days before that home finally got the right type of activity. So even the pricing strategy that we taught, or we teach, which is a very good, pricing strategy, you still gotta tweak it based on your average days on market. It's not just in the first 2 weeks we need to drop the price. That's what many agents are saying, okay? They say the first 2 weeks is the time that we need to drop the price. Sometimes that's true, because you're not getting enough activity. But when you're seeing the average days on market going to 90 to 100 days, that's really your new indicator. It's not the 2 weeks anymore. It's not 3 weeks. It's actually getting to 40 days to, so don't be so quick to drop the price in every situation. And I'll tell you, I've had this conversation with top agents out of the Wood Ranch office, and they're like, look, if it doesn't sell in the first 3 weeks, it's not selling at all. It's not true. It's not always true. So we did a $20,000 reduction, nothing happened right away. And my seller blasted me, and it was just like, hey, you said that we would get 1 to 3 showings a week once we dropped to 20K. I said, no. What I said was, when we're getting 1 to 3 showings a week, now we know we're within 3 to 5% of that sweet spot, that price. Do you guys see the difference?
Yes.
So I had to reposition it, and this guy was highly analytical. He was an engineer, and he was just like, hey, he's like, I'm looking at the average price per square foot. We need a new strategy. Your strategy's not working. And he just tells me, and he's upset. And I started getting upset, and what you shouldn't do. And finally, at a point, I just get to, I said, look, do you trust me? He said, obviously I trust you. I wouldn't have listed with you. I said, okay, then I need a little bit of patience right now. I need some patience on your part, because our only other option is to drop the price further. And I know you're at the right price at 865. So sure enough, we waited 2 more weeks. 2 offers came in. One came in super low, the second one came in at 855. We countered to 860. We sold at 860,000. So sometimes you just gotta kind of pull it off. And I had another agent who did a lot of business down the street calling me freaking out, same thing, because it was hitting 30 days and her house wasn't moving. And she priced hers right under mine. And she's like, I'm used to all my houses selling in the first week. I don't know what to do. I said, look, I have an offer on the table right now. It's a low offer, but I got one. Don't do anything right now, you know what I mean? Just at least give us this weekend. That weekend, both our houses sold. Ours did, and that one did. If she drops her price, threw everything off. You see, does that make sense? So it's a little bit different than just drop that price. You gotta find the sweet spot. You gotta have a little bit of range, and most buyers, as we know right now, are negotiating. So, but there are multiple offer situations that are happening. 7 offers, not just on the low-priced homes. I heard on a $1.3 million property, 7 offers, like right out the gate.
Wow.
It's picking up again. So right now, the activity is hot. Now is the time to list. And as we talk about the cycle, when we say the market, we said the current condition of the market. We also want to talk about where it's been, where it is, and where it's heading, right? So as we talk about the market, there's a few different ways that I'll handle it. One of them, I'll ask the seller, so when do you believe the bottom of the market was? What year would you say was the very bottom of the market?
Depends on the zip code.
Right, for Ventura County, we'll just say in this area, the very bottom, what year did you say? I'm sorry? 09, that's a close guess. 09's close. 8's close. It is actually 2011 was the very bottom of the market. Okay, so real estate works in 5 to 7 year cycles. On average, that's the way that it's worked. We used to say every decade, but now it's about 5 to 7 years of growth, 5 to 7 years of, recession or coming down, right? I'm sorry?
Oh, I just said decline.
Oh, okay.
That would
Yes,
mean
decline.
adding in.
Yes, no,
Adding
decline's
in.
perfect. I thought I heard why, and I was like,
Wouldn't that mean
that's just the way
we're
it
due
works.
again?
I'm sorry?
Then we're due again.
Absolutely. We're
For it
definitely
to crash
absolutely.
if you're
So
talking
this,
from 11.
the reason why this is important, and this helps overcome one of the most important objections of why people want to wait till future to sell their home, or maybe I should rent the property out. Maybe it's better to lease it out, right? And just keep it as a rental. And what I share with them, I say, look, it works in cycles. So 2011 being the bottom, what year are we in? 2020, right? It's 9 years. 9 years of growth. So the stage goes to growth, which we've had a lot of growth since 2011 to where we're at today. The next stage, does anybody know the next stage after growth? Hyper supply. Hyper supply means sellers know we're past the peak. So everybody puts their house on the market. And guess what happens? Slows everything down. We see longer days on market, right? The inventory is a little thicker right now, depending on the zip code of where you're at. Camarillo, it's actually pretty thin, but they're still sitting. Why is that the case if we're in a low inventory market in a growth stage? Because buyers are savvy, price, affordability, right? They've seen the crash, they've seen it, so there's hesitation. We don't want to lose again, right? So there's a lot of hesitation there, but why are the multiple offers out there right now? Right, at different price points and things like that.
Or
So
interest rates are
interest
still
rates.
good.
interest rates are phenomenal right now.
They're really good.
That's the reason why people are making moves, okay, which is really good right now. So as we talk about the market and the cycles, with the 5 years up, 5 to 7 years up, and 5 to 7 years down, the reason why this gets important is if somebody says, okay, well, I want it, maybe a year or 2 years from now, I'm thinking about selling my place. How could that be costly to them? Big time, right?
Yeah.
Could be tens of thousands, could be, I don't want to get to the hundreds of thousands, but definitely tens of thousands of dollars that they could believe in. And we're going to show those stats and do that. The more important point that I try to make to them is, look, if you're thinking about renting it out, you need to be ready for the next 10 to 14 years to ride that next wave, right? 5 to 7 years up, 5 to 7 years down, then it's going to take another 5 to 7 years to get back up. So if you want to rent for the next 14 years, that's perfect. Don't sell right now, right? But if you don't, if you're thinking, okay, I may want to only do this for a couple years, or a year, or 2 or 3 years, see how costly that could be. It could be the worst decision that you make. Because now, if you do catch it on the hyper supply side, where everybody's trying to sell your home, now everything needs to be perfect, right? Buyers are expecting HGTV properties, right, with all the newest updates. They want new roofs, they want AC, they want furnace, they want everything done. They want a brand new home on a home that's built in 1960. That's the expectations right now, because there's choices and there's things that are happening, and it's the first time in a while that buyers have had this opportunity. It's been on the selling side for so long. Now buyers are like, okay, great, I'm going to get a great opportunity, get a great deal, especially with the low interest rate. Okay, so that cycle and that market discussion is very important, and it's very important that it happens in the presentation, because if the dots are being connected, they're going to sense the urgency that they need to list their home now. And they need to get started right away, and they don't have time to wait, because the longer that they wait, now they're going to either have to improve their house more or price their house more competitively, which is going to be a little bit lower. Okay. Does that all make sense? Perfect. Okay, so after we're at a good place with our clients, right? So we've done the presentation, we've asked questions, we know exactly what it is they're trying to accomplish. We feel confident based on what we presented that they feel good about us. What do we want to do at that point in time? We feel it's really good in the presentation.
Close it.
we're getting close, we wanna close, how do we close?
Then that's when you talk about the commission and all that, right?
Right,
And
we
the
wanna
price,
get to it.
set the price.
So when they ask you the question, so what do you charge commission? And you know you've gone through a pretty good part of it, they're telling you right then that they're ready, okay? And hopefully you've created enough value at that point in time. So what you wanna get to is what I call the temperature gauge question, okay? And to keep it in its most simplest forms, all I can say is, so how do you guys feel about what I've presented today? Right? Very simple. How do you feel about what I've shared with you today? And hear what they respond with, right? They can say, oh, it sounds really good. When we ask that question, they start committing and saying, you know, we really like, they're typically not gonna say, you know, you're horrible, you're not dressed very well, I don't, you know, I don't think that you're that good, you look like you just started yesterday, you know, whatever. They're typically not gonna start with that. But there may be some hesitation there, and that's what you want to hear. You want to hear if there is any hesitation. If there isn't, another way that I ask the question for the temperature gauge question, I'll say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being 100% confident, 1 being 10% confident, where would you say that you are at in terms of me representing you in the sale of your home? And usually you'll hear a response like a 9, a 9.5. You know, some will say a 10. But more are going to, you know, they're going to say something pretty complimentary. But all I want to hear is any type of variance. And when I hear that variance, the next thing that I'm going to do is say something like, okay, so you're at a 9, right? 9, well, thank you, that's great, I appreciate that. But I want you to be 100% confident that I'm the one to sell your home. So what is it that, you know, is your hesitation, or what is your concern from what I've shared with you so far? And then this is isolating the objection. They're gonna say, well, we have a friend that is also an agent and they quoted 4.5% commission. We don't know what you're charging commission yet, but we really like everything that you've said so far, okay? If they say that, now I'm gonna isolate that and say, okay, so we're gonna discuss commission here very soon. Before discussing commission, I wanna make sure that, again, that you know that I'm the one to represent you. So you mentioned that you have a friend. Have you already signed any paperwork with that friend? You know, I'm gonna start asking some questions, get a little better feel for who this friend is, right? And they're gonna share that, typically share, or sometimes they're gonna keep their cards closed and not share, and not say a name, not say anything else. They're just gonna say, we just wanna interview 2 or 3 people. So what I'm gonna try to do is isolate that objection and say, okay, so putting commission aside, right? If we can work the commission out, do you feel confident that I can sell your home and that I'll do the best job in representing you? And they'll say, well, no, like I said, I got this friend and I've already told them and they're just starting out, and they'll start saying things like that. They're just starting out and I want to help them out and I don't want to ruin that friendship. So then for me personally, I'll typically ask a question like, so is this your most important investment or asset that you currently own for your family? And they'll usually respond with yes. So it's a very important decision that you hire somebody who has experience that's going to protect your equity and help you get what it is that you want for the sale of this home. Is that correct? Yes, it is. So if things don't work out with your friend, are you going to be, you know, how are you going to handle that situation if they don't get you the results that you're looking for? Well, I never really thought of that. You know, I just figured they'd sell the home, right? They're not thinking that far ahead. So what you want to start saying is, okay, well, you know, just in terms of if it doesn't work out, how are you going to handle that situation? They start thinking along those lines. It's like, okay, maybe that may not be the best decision. And then how do I fire that friend if it doesn't work out? Really is what you're trying to get to, or a relative or somebody that you're trying to help out. It's challenging. So you got to have those discussions, and then they see the value in working with you right now. Okay? Those things. Yes, ma'am.
So sometimes, I've been in a situation like that and I've asked, so is selling your home for the most money with an experienced agent more important than doing someone a favor? Or something along
That's a
those
great way to
lines.
handle that as well. Yeah, so just different things, but basically we want to have those questions. Practice that, and that's what we are going to practice moving forward. Yes, any questions, or you good? Okay, sounds good. All right, so we did the temperature gauge question. Then we're going to get into the pricing, right? After we talked about the market, and then we're going to go through what I like to do on the CMA report is I always have my 3 sales. I want to have the top sales in that neighborhood. Whatever the top property is, you have to know what the top sale is. Ideally within the last 6 months, you know, similar to how an appraiser is going to look at a property. I also want to have 3 pendings. active, I don't always have on there. Certain situations I'll put active. But why wouldn't I put active on there?
They haven't sold yet.
Haven't sold yet. They could be distractions. They could throw off in terms of pricing, right? Because you got an unrealistic seller or agent who hasn't, done as an effective of a job in terms of getting them to price it right, right? So it can throw off our expectations in terms of listening.
But if
So-
it's a lot of days on the market, you do wanna show them, right?
Exactly. No, that was perfect. So you already got close to it. The other thing I'll throw in is the canceled and the expires. So know how many canceled and expireds are in a given price point for a particular property as you go into it. So then you can show them 3 of them, and then what I'll print out is the history. So you can go through the detailed data report, print the history out, see when they first listed it, all the days on market, all the price adjustments, all the open houses, and they'll see a nice page to 2-page of description of what this property went through in terms of trying to sell their house. That will be some of the most powerful concrete information that you can show them that's gonna help them see that you've done your due diligence, that you know what you're talking about, and that you're showing by example, look, this is a model match that's thinking of the same price that you first mentioned, that other agent mentioned, and this is exactly how long they've been on the market, okay? So little key things like that that you wanna make sure that you're bringing that data in that report. So again, 3 solds, 3 pendings if there are 3 pendings, and then 3 canceled or expired, and I wanna show those stories. Then you, on the 3 solds, the top ones, you wanna show what they did right. The professional photography, right? Making sure that it was in the best light in terms of how it's done and how it's exposed. If they've listed, if they're yours, even better, in terms of the pendings and the solds, it's even better. So you wanna show them success stories, you wanna show them what didn't work out, and that's also gonna help you with getting them to come to the right price. So there's different ways of going through that. Again, like I said, I do my toolkit CMA, I do my 1-line report, and I go through it with that. Finally, if we're coming with price, and we've had the commission discussed, there's a couple ways to handle the commission. I've done it before where literally I was walking through doing the tour, and the guy was like, look, and she was trying to do it as a for sale by owner. She's like, I've been offered everything. She's like, you're not gonna charge me more than 5%, are you? I said, well, usually I charge 6%, but because you're a friend of the family, we'll do it for 5%. And then right after that, I'm asking, did you have a price in mind? See, before I would never ask the clients that question. What price do you have in mind? We've done all this preparation on price. Oh, I'm going to give this stunning presentation on price and all the reasons why it's this price, and we're going to tell them. And I know it's going to be a battle, and we got all this preconception when all I had to do was ask the question, right? So what price did you have in mind? Gal said $495. She's like, the property's paid off. I just want to make sure that it sells at $495. My assumption was she did it as a FSBO. She was going to want to list around $515, $520. My next sheets were for $515 and $520. Right? So that was my assumption. If I don't ask that question, she says $495. We had price, we had commission handled. We agreed on commission, we agreed on price. So what's the next step? Paperwork, right? So we went right down, wrote that price in, wrote the commission in, signed the paperwork. It was a 5-minute presentation to go into the signed agreement. Now it was a referral, so it in certain situations can be like that. You don't have to go through this entire long presentation with this outline. This outline is to give you a map in your head of what it should look like, what magic should happen in that presentation, where you know you've done your temperature gauge, you got a good feel that, okay, now's the time that we need to start discovering either their excuses of why they're not going to commit with me right now, or, let's start with the paperwork and let's get signed. So the better that you get to that in reading and understanding and asking those questions, then you're going to see, okay, it doesn't need to go a full hour or 30 minutes or whatever the case is. But a lot of times there's a lot of unanswered questions, and we have to see when people don't make decisions, it's because they have unanswered questions. So we need to figure out what are they unsure of that they feel confident that they're going to allow me to lead them through the process. Does that all make sense? Okay, perfect. So we talked about pricing, then we go into the paperwork, and then typically, if you're not already doing this, and John and George will tell you to start at 7% commission, right? But if you're not, in my contract, what's printed out is 6%, right, on the commission. So I check the box and I put 6%. On the selling office side, I'm always going to leave that blank. Typically not going to put anything in there.
How
Yes,
do you
ma'am.
justify 6% if everybody else is charging 5%?
Great question. Okay. So that's typically the objection
And how do you
handler.
start at 7%? Oh my God.
I know.
Tell yourself before. There's something I missed at the very beginning. Before you show up to the presentation, we talked about mindset, right? You need to believe that you're the best person for the job. You can't think you're second best. You can't think you're third. This isn't an ego thing. It's a confidence that you have to believe that you're the best. Number two, you got to believe that you can get the job done. Okay? And then when you go through the presentation in terms of 6%, how do you get it? You know, it's I gotta be just very, very honest. There was a gal that I was coaching, and she had never broken 100,000 in 5 years that she had worked with the company. This is prior to the Century 21 hours. 5 years with the business, never broke 100,000. Started coming to the morning ascent, started practicing the presentation, outlined the presentation, heard George and John speak. Now she takes 6% listings, 3.5% on her side, 2.5% on the other side, and on a regular basis. And I saw it and I was just like, wow, and saw her just do it and do it. She's like, I know my value. I'm worth 6%. I know what it is that I'm going to do. And just, she knew in her mind that she was going to do it. Now she probably lost some opportunities, but I can tell you that year she made $278,000 between September and September, and was charged a higher commission and doing it. And it was, again, 5 years never broke 100 to going to $270,000 that next year. It's your belief. It's the way that you present yourself, that they see the value in what it is that you bring. And there's also a part that I do with the listing presentation is I separate the listing agreement versus offers on the table. Okay? So the listing agreement, when I share that paperwork, I'm sharing with them that, look, if you feel that I'm the one to represent you, you want me in your corner from beginning to end, it's not just getting you the price, right? We got to overcome repairs. We got to overcome appraisals. We have to, a lot of properties, a lot of offers are falling out of escrow, so we got to sell it 2 or 3 times. We didn't talk about the 4 pillars. I'll get to that. So all these different things that happen that we need to help overcome right through that process. And they need to hear that. Most don't hear it in the listing presentation of all the things that need to be overcome. So what I tell them is the only way that I get paid is if I successfully close your transaction and get you everything that it is that you want. It's what you walk away with. So when they're saying commission, what do you charge commission? Their concern is that they're going to walk away with the most amount of money possible that they can. And you are going to get what you paid for in many situations, because many agents who are cutting commissions, and this isn't, believe me, there's certain situations for friends, families that you take care of.
They're the worst.
You do what you got to do.
They should be
What's that?
7%.
What's that?
That's
The
a
family?
family, they
All
are
right. Right. There's going to be certain exceptions, right?
Yeah.
But as a standard practice, you have to set standard principles. And the best thing about it at the 6 is I'm putting that line through it, and I love seeing that line go through that 6%. Well, I don't have to drop it all the way down to 5%. I can go to 5.5%, right? I can go to 5.75. These are things, again, that we shared when we started doing our morning ascents from other agents who do a high level of production, and this is what they do across the country in terms of how they handle their commissions and doing it. And another gal who was in my office who made $250 a year consistently, been in business 30 plus years. Last year, or the first year we started coaching and doing it, she went to 400,000. After that, hit 600,000. Not last year, the year before that. This last year was on pace for 650. I think she ended up around 620, 640. Her big thing was her commission. Her commission went from an average of about 1.8 because of a lot of high-end properties and other things like that, to going to like a 249. And again, she was taking 6% commissions, 3.5% on her side on million-plus properties, 6%. Where I've heard other agents say there's no way you'll ever get that commission on that. So the biggest thing I can say is when the presentation goes the way that it's supposed to go, they see the value, and there is no question on what your worth is in terms of what it is that you're going to do. They see it. And if they do, then you have the discussion. It's your objection handling ability on that commission question. They're like, look, I love you, you're great, we know you do an amazing job in selling the home. Bottom line,